I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who got cheated on. My name's Jake, and I'm in my mid-30s, living what I thought was a pretty solid life with my wife, Claire. We met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions, and got married 5 years ago. Everything seemed perfect, or at least it did until it didn't. The first cracks in our relationship appeared about a year ago. It was subtle at first, a sudden change in her behavior that I brushed off as just a phase. Claire started working late more often, claiming it was the new project at the publishing house. She'd come home late, always smelling of expensive wine and wearing that perfume I hated. I told myself it was just a stressful time at work, but deep down I sensed something was off. Friends started to notice too. They asked if I was okay, if Claire and I were all right. I'd laugh it off, insisting we were just busy with life. After all, that's what adults do, right? We get caught up in our jobs and sometimes forget to nurture our relationships. But it was more than just that. I caught her texting late. At night, her phone glued to her hand whenever I was around. She would lock it and quickly change the subject if I asked who she was talking to. One evening, I decided to surprise her with dinner. I thought a little romantic gesture would reignite some of that spark we had in the beginning. I cooked her favorite pasta and even bought a bottle of her beloved red wine. When I got home, though, I found her phone sitting on the kitchen counter, lit up with a message notification. I hesitated for a moment, then curiosity got the best of me. I glanced at the screen. The message was from someone named Derek. It was a simple, "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe." My heart dropped. I quickly put the phone down, my mind racing. Who was this Derek? The more I thought about it, the more I felt that tight knot of anxiety in my stomach. That night Claire came home late again and my heart was pounding. I confronted her as soon as she walked in the door. "Who is Derek?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I could see the color drain from her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Finally, she stammered, "It's just a coworker. You know how publishing is, Jake. It's all about networking." I wanted to believe her, but instinct told me otherwise. I pressed her, demanding to know the truth. She finally blurted out that Derek was just a mentor, someone who helped her with her career. I wanted to let it go, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being lied to. Every excuse sounded rehearsed, and the way she avoided eye contact told me she was hiding something. Days turned into weeks, and I kept watching her like a hawk. The more I tried to trust her, the more I found myself spiraling into doubt. Then one fateful Saturday, I decided to follow her. I know it sounds crazy, but I needed to know. I waited until she left the house, then quietly got into my car and trailed her. She drove to a trendy cafe across town, a place I knew she loved. My stomach churned with nervous energy as I parked a block away and watched. It wasn't long before I saw Derek walk in. My heart raced as I watched Claire laugh at something he said, her head thrown back in that way I hadn't seen in months. I felt like the ground had crumbled beneath my feet. All those little signs, all the times I'd been reassured that everything was fine, they rushed back in a flood of betrayal. I sat there, frozen, helplessly watching my wife flirt with another man. The feeling of being crushed under the weight of realization was overwhelming. Claire was cheating on me, and there was no denying it now. When she finally left the cafe, I followed her home, my mind racing with a million thoughts. I wasn't just angry, I was devastated. I felt like a fool. How had I not seen it sooner? How could I have trusted her so blindly? Upon returning home, I felt a mix of fury and despair. I had to confront her again, but this time I knew I had the evidence to back up my feelings. I was no longer going to let her brush my suspicions aside. This was going to be different. As I sat on the couch, waiting for her to return, I couldn't help but think about the kind of person she had become. The woman I loved was betraying everything we built together, and I was ready for the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Claire walked through the door, her usual cheerful demeanor fading as she noticed the serious look on my face. I could feel the tension in the air thickening, like the calm before a storm. She tossed her keys on the counter and turned to me, a flicker of concern crossing her features. "Jake, what's wrong?" she asked, trying to maintain her nonchalant tone. It felt insincere, almost as if she knew I had something to confront her about. I stood up, crossing my arms over my chest in a defensive posture. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but laced with an underlying anger. I saw you today at the cafe with Derek. Her eyes widened and she took a step back, clearly caught off guard. What are you talking about? She stammered, putting on a facade of confusion. I don't know what you mean. The denial was infuriating, especially considering I'd just seen her flirt with him. Cut the crap, Claire. I saw you laughing with him. You looked really cozy. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. I thought you said he was just a mentor. Her expression shifted, the mask slipping just for a moment. It's not what you think, she insisted, her voice rising defensively. We were just talking about work. You're making it sound worse than it is. I stepped closer, refusing to be swayed by her flimsy excuses. Just talking, really. Because it looked a lot like flirting to me. I can't believe you thought you could hide this from me. My chest tightened with each word as a mix of anger and hurt bubbled inside me. Claire's eyes darted away and she bit her lip, trying to collect her thoughts. I could see her mind racing as she scrambled for a believable story. Jake, please, you have to understand. I don't have to understand anything. I cut her off, my voice rising. You were going behind my back. You've been lying to me for months. The conversation quickly escalated into a shouting match, with Claire desperately trying to insist that nothing was wrong, that I was imagining things. The deeper she dug, the more outrageous her claims became, and I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. You're being paranoid, you're overreacting, she yelled, throwing her hands up in frustration. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought we had a partnership built on trust, but this just felt like a betrayal of everything we'd shared. You think I'm paranoid? I followed you, Claire. I saw you with my own eyes. I was practically shouting now, my heart racing, anger spilling out in waves. She threw her arms up in exasperation. Oh, so now you're a stalker? This is ridiculous. The absurdity of her response only fueled my rage. Ridiculous. You're the one who's been sneaking around. You think I wanted to follow you. I did it because I had to know the truth. For a moment there was silence. The weight of the confrontation hung heavily between us. I could see her steeling herself, preparing to deliver whatever excuse she had left. Jake, I swear it's not what you think. It's complicated, she said, her voice suddenly softer, more pleading. Complicated, really? I replied, incredulity dripping from my words. How complicated can it get when your mentor is a guy you're clearly into? She started to cry then, tears streaming down her face, but I felt no sympathy. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to happen, it just did, she said between sobs. Derek is so different from you, and I don't know what happened. The admission cut deeper than any knife. I had been feeling neglected, but hearing her say that she'd sought comfort in another man stung more than I ever could have anticipated. So you think going to another guy is the answer? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. I thought I could figure things out, I thought. She trailed off and I could see the guilt washing over her. I thought it was just a phase and I would come back to you, but it got out of hand. I'm so sorry, Jake. Her apology felt hollow. It was too little, too late. Sorry doesn't fix this, Claire. I took a step back, attempting to regain my composure. What do you want me to say? That I'll just forget this? That I'll accept your half-hearted explanation? I felt a tumult of emotions surging through me, anger, betrayal, sadness. I had never imagined we'd end up here in this moment of confrontation, unraveling our marriage thread by thread. As I stood there, I felt a shift within myself. This wasn't just about her betrayal anymore. It was about me reclaiming my power. I'm done, Claire, I said, my voice calmer now but still fierce. I can't keep doing this. I deserve better than to be someone's second choice. I'm out. The realization hung heavy in the air as Claire's sobs filled the room. I couldn't bear to look at her anymore, the pain too raw, the betrayal too fresh. I took a deep breath, my mind racing with thoughts of what came next. I needed a plan, a way to channel this agony into something productive. I had to transform this hurt into strength, but how? As I walked away from her, I knew this was just the beginning of my journey. Little did I know, I was about to embark on a path I never expected, one that would lead me to write my truth and reclaim my life in a way that would shock her and the world around us. After that explosive confrontation, I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. I didn't know what to do next. My mind was racing, emotions tangled up in a ball of raw hurt and anger. I had just walked away from my marriage, and while part of me felt liberated, another part was terrified. How was I supposed to navigate life now? I spent the first few days in a daze trying to process everything. I moved into the guest room, the space feeling foreign and empty. I wanted to gather my thoughts, reflect on what had happened, and most importantly, find a way to heal. But every time I picked up my phone to call a friend or family member, I hesitated. How could I explain this? How could I recount the story of betrayal without sounding like a victim? Social media wasn't any better. Every time I opened Facebook or Instagram, I saw couples smiling, posting about their perfect lives, and I felt a surge of rage followed by overwhelming sadness. I wanted to scream at the world for being so blissfully unaware of the pain I was going through. That's when it hit me. I needed an outlet, something to channel my emotions into. I had always loved writing but had never pursued it seriously. Now, it felt like the perfect escape. I grabbed my laptop and began typing furiously, pouring out everything I felt onto the pages. I talked about the heartbreak, the betrayal, and the moments leading up to that fateful day when I caught Claire. I wrote about the love I once felt and the dreams I had for our future, dreams that now seemed shattered. Days turned into weeks as I continued to write. Each session felt cathartic, a release from the turmoil inside me. I started to weave a narrative about a man discovering his wife's infidelity, but I didn't want it to just be a story of heartbreak. I wanted it to be a story of revenge, a tale where the husband would reclaim his dignity in the most unexpected way. And then, while I was deep in thought one night, a wild idea struck me. What if I wrote a novel based on my experience? Not just an outlet, but a full-blown bestseller. I could expose Claire's betrayal in the most creative way possible, turning my pain into art. At first, the thought was a bit daunting. I worried about how to portray the characters without them being obvious representations of Claire and me. But I quickly realized that it could be liberating. I would create exaggerated characters, a dramatic plot, and a narrative that reflected my feelings without directly attacking Claire. I spent countless nights at my laptop, crafting my story. I made the husband a sympathetic yet flawed character, someone who was relatable and felt genuine pain. The wife, on the other hand, was a glamorous, self-centered character who reveled in her own fame and success. I drew inspiration from Claire's obsession with the literary world, making my character a famous author who used her charm to manipulate anyone in her path. As I wrote, I found myself getting more and more into the world I was creating. I invented scandalous plot twists, added characters who were witty and sarcastic, and developed a revenge plot that felt empowering. I had the husband go through a transformation, one that changed him from a passive victim to an assertive force. One of the key elements of my story involved the husband not just confronting the wife but doing so in a way that would expose her deceit publicly. I crafted a climactic scene where he reveals everything during a major book signing event, where she had invited him to show off her latest bestseller. It was deliciously poetic, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought of it. As the first draft began to take shape, I started seeking feedback. I joined online writing groups, sharing snippets of my work anonymously. The responses were overwhelmingly positive, and for the first time in months I felt a flicker of hope. I was channeling my anger, hurt, and betrayal into something meaningful. This project became my obsession. I barely left the house, losing myself in the plot and characters. I began to ignore Claire, who would periodically reach out with text messages trying to reconcile. I'd read them, then put my phone down, feeling absolutely nothing. I was done with her. This was my time. But the more I immersed myself in the story, the more I realized that I wasn't just writing a book about revenge. I was also learning about myself. I was discovering resilience in my words, something I never thought I had. I was finding my voice, reclaiming my narrative, and realizing that what Claire had done to me didn't define who I was. Finally, after 6 months of relentless writing and revisions, I had a finished manuscript. I titled it The Last Chapter, a nod to the idea of reclaiming my life and closing the book on that dark chapter with Claire. I spent the next few weeks researching literary agents and publishers, drafting query letters, and preparing to pitch my work. I was filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would people want to read my story? Was it good enough? But deep down, I knew I had created something powerful from my pain. I was ready to take that leap, ready to share my truth with the world, and possibly even to expose Claire for who she really was. As I hit the submission button for the first agent, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was no longer Jake, the betrayed husband. I was an author, ready to unveil my truth. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a journey that would not only redefine my relationship with Claire, but also transform the very fabric of my life. The weeks following my submission were a whirlwind of anticipation and anxiety. I spent my days constantly checking my email, heart racing at the sight of any notification. Would this be the moment an agent reached out? Would they see the potential in my story? Each day felt like climbing a mountain, only to find that the peak was always just out of reach. Finally, after a month filled with a roller coaster of emotions, I received my first response. It was from an agent who had read my query and wanted to see the full manuscript. I could hardly believe it. My fingers trembled as I typed out a quick reply, thanking her for the opportunity. It felt surreal, as if my entire life had shifted overnight. As I waited for her feedback, I continued to work on marketing myself and my manuscript. I set up social media accounts dedicated to my writing journey, sharing snippets and behind-the-scenes glimpses of my creative process. I was amazed at how many people resonated with my story. Readers began to follow my journey, leaving supportive messages and sharing their own experiences with heartbreak and betrayal. It was cathartic, and I found solace in this newfound community. Then, one fateful afternoon, I received an email from the agent. My heart raced as I clicked it open, scanning the words as quickly as I could. She loved the manuscript. She loved my voice, the characters, and the emotional depth of the story. She wanted to represent me. I couldn't contain my excitement. I jumped from my chair, pacing the room with a grin plastered across my face. I had done it. All those months of pouring my heart into those words had led to this moment. I was going to be a published author. The reality of it all began to sink in as I signed the contract with the agent. This was no longer just a cathartic endeavor. It was a business. I was about to expose a part of my life I had kept hidden. I knew Claire would eventually find out, and I was ready for the storm that would follow. As I worked with my agent on revisions, refining the manuscript and preparing for its release, I felt a sense of empowerment I had never experienced before. Each edit brought me closer to my ultimate goal, to reclaim my narrative and confront Claire, both through my book and in real life. Through the editing process, I began to imagine the release party for my book. I envisioned a room filled with people, all eager to hear my story. I wanted to share my journey, from betrayal to healing, and to inspire others who might find themselves in similar situations. I wanted to show that it was possible to come out on the other side stronger and more resilient. But even as I reveled in this newfound success, the specter of Claire loomed over me. She had reached out multiple times, trying to apologize and make sense of what had transpired. I ignored her texts, but each ping of my phone made my stomach churn. One evening, out of nowhere, I received a voicemail from her. My instinct was to delete it, but something stopped me. I played it back, hearing her shaky voice as she broke down, pleading for a chance to explain herself. "Jake, please, I'm so sorry for everything. I messed up. I can't lose. Can we talk?" Part of me felt a flicker of sympathy, but I pushed it aside. I didn't want to talk. I didn't owe her anything. My book was my way of reclaiming my story, and I wasn't about to let her spin it again. Then came the day when my agent called with exciting news. My book was going to be published. I felt a rush of adrenaline as she detailed the plans for marketing and promotion. There would be a launch party, and I would get to present my work to the public. It felt like a dream, surreal yet exhilarating. But with each passing day, I couldn't shake the thought of Claire getting wind of my book. What would she say? Would she try to deflect blame, making herself the victim in this story? My heart raced at the thought, but I had to stay focused. This was about me, my journey, and my truth. The night before the launch, I lay in bed, anxiety swirling through my mind. I thought about how Claire would react once she read the book. I imagined her shock, her indignation. Would she call me? Would she try to confront me in public? I had no idea, but I felt ready for whatever storm she would bring. Finally, the day arrived. The launch party was set in a cozy bookstore downtown, packed with people eager to hear my story. Friends, family, and even strangers filled the room. I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as I prepared to read an excerpt from my book. This was it, the moment I had been building up to for months. As I stood in front of the crowd, my heart raced. I took a deep breath and began to read, feeling the weight of my words resonate with everyone in the room. I could see their faces, a mixture of empathy, surprise, and even laughter at the right moments. The emotional journey I had crafted connected with them, and I felt a sense of pride swelling in my chest. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that Claire would soon make her presence known. The launch went off without a hitch, and as I wrapped up my reading, the applause was deafening. I felt alive, invigorated by the support and love surrounding me. And then, amidst the celebration, the door swung open and there she stood, Claire. In that moment, the world around me faded away. The cheers, the laughter, they all vanished as my heart dropped. She looked different, more vulnerable than I remembered, but that didn't change the fact that she was here. The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward her. I could feel the tension rise as I struggled to maintain my composure. This was my moment, and now it felt threatened by her presence. I could see her scanning the crowd, her eyes landing on me. She took a step forward, hesitating as if unsure of her next move. "Jake," she said, her voice unsteady, "can we talk?" I had prepared for this moment, but I wasn't sure how to react. I felt a wave of emotions crash over me, anger, sadness, betrayal. But more than anything, I felt ready. Ready to confront her not just as a scorned husband, but as a man who had found his voice. "Not here," I replied coolly, trying to maintain my composure. I looked around at the people who had supported me, their eyes filled with curiosity. "You can't just show up here after everything." Claire's expression shifted from uncertainty to desperation. "But I need to explain. You don't understand what I was going through." I shook my head, steeling myself against her pleas. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. "You had your chance, Claire. This is my moment, and it's time for you to let me go." The weight of that moment felt monumental, and I knew that everything was about to change. No matter how this conversation went, I was ready to stand my ground. I had written my truth, and I wasn't about to let her rewrite my story again. As I stood there, the spotlight shifted from my book launch to the tension unfolding between Claire and me. The air felt charged, thick with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. I could hear the murmurs from the crowd, their curiosity palpable as they awaited what would happen next. Claire looked vulnerable, but I reminded myself that vulnerability doesn't erase betrayal. "Jake, please," she pleaded, her voice shaky. "I just want a chance to explain everything. You need to know the truth." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "The truth? You mean the truth about your affair with Derek, about how you chose him over me? Because I think I've got a pretty good handle on that." I shot back, my voice steady. I wasn't about to let her twist this moment or manipulate my feelings any longer. Claire's expression shifted from desperation to anger, though the tears in her eyes remained. "You don't understand. I was lost, and I didn't know how to reach out to you. I thought I could handle things on my own, but then everything spiraled out of control." "Lost?" I echoed, my voice rising slightly. "You were lost in your own self-interest, Claire. You could have talked to me. You could have been honest, but instead you chose to betray me. You broke our vows. You shattered everything we built together." The crowd absorbed my words, their collective focus on us growing. I could see sympathetic glances, and a few people even nodded in agreement. This was my story, and I was reclaiming it right in front of everyone. "I know I messed up, and I'm not trying to justify my actions," she said, her voice trembling. "But I want to make things right. I want to fix this." "Fix it?" I laughed bitterly, incredulous at her audacity. "How do you fix a lie? How do you fix the fact that you were intimate with another man while I was at home wondering why my wife had disappeared?" Claire stepped closer, her voice lowering as if trying to connect with me in a meaningful way. "I miss you, Jake. I miss us. I thought I could have both, my career, my independence, and you, but I was wrong. I see that now." I shook my head, feeling the anger bubbling up again. You don't get it, do you? You can't just waltz in here and act like everything's fine. You think because you show up at my book launch, I'm just supposed to forgive you. No, you made your choices and I've made mine. As the words left my mouth, I realized how far I had come. I wasn't just a victim here. I was a man standing firm in his truth, ready to move forward without the weight of her betrayal dragging me down. I had created a narrative where I was the one who took control, and this was part of my journey. I'm happy for you, Jake, Claire said, her voice softer now, almost defeated. I really am. I just thought we could talk about this without the audience. There is no without the audience anymore, I replied firmly. You made your choices and now I'm living with the consequences. I need to move on. I need to focus on me, on my future. I turned away from her, feeling the support of friends and strangers alike, their energy bolstering my strength. I could hear whispers in the room, people talking about Claire's sudden appearance, speculating on what had just transpired. It was a moment of vulnerability for both of us, but I was ready to embrace mine and leave her behind. Jake, please, she called, desperation creeping into her voice again. I can change. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything. Just tell me you'll give us another chance. As I looked back at her, I felt a mix of compassion and resolve. I remembered the love we once shared, the dreams we had built together, but those memories were now tainted by betrayal. No, Claire, it's not that simple. You've burned the bridge between us and I can't go back. I won't. The finality of my words hung in the air, and with that realization I felt a wave of liberation wash over me. I had spent months trapped in a cycle of hurt and anger, but now I was stepping into a new chapter, one that didn't include her. With a deep breath, I turned back to the crowd who had watched the entire confrontation unfold. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for their support. Thank you all for coming tonight. This is my story, and I hope it resonates with anyone dealing with betrayal or heartbreak. Remember, you have the power to reclaim your narrative. As I finished my speech, the crowd erupted into applause, cheers ringing in my ears. I felt empowered, ready to embrace the next phase of my life, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Claire was just a chapter in my past, and I was ready to close that book for good. But as the applause faded and I moved through the crowd, I couldn't shake the feeling that Claire wouldn't let go so easily. I knew I had to be prepared for whatever came next. Would she try to spin the narrative in her favor? Would she reach out to the media or attempt to create a scandal? Regardless, I was ready to face it all. I had learned that my story was mine to tell, and no one could take that away from me. With every word I had written, I had claimed my power, and I wasn't about to let anyone else define me again. I had taken the pen back, and now I was in control. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on everything that had transpired. I no longer felt like a victim. I felt like a survivor. I had transformed my pain into something beautiful, and I was ready to embrace whatever chapters were yet to be written in my life. Little did I know, the journey was far from over, and the real test of strength was just beginning. The days following the launch were a whirlwind of events, interviews, and publicity. My book, The Last Chapter, began to gain traction, and people were reaching out to me from all corners, sharing their own stories of love, betrayal, and resilience. I felt a sense of community forming around my narrative, and it was both overwhelming and empowering. But even amidst the excitement, Claire lingered in the back of my mind. I had anticipated her reaction to the book, but I wasn't prepared for how far she would go to twist the narrative in her favor. A couple of weeks after the launch, I received a call from my agent. Jake, I just wanted to give you a heads up. Claire has been reaching out to the media, she said, concern evident in her voice. She's trying to make it sound like you've exploited your relationship for profit. It could become a scandal. My heart sank. I had known she would react, but this felt like a new low. Is she trying to paint herself as the victim? I asked, incredulous. After everything she did, it seems so. She's claiming the book misrepresents your relationship and that you're dragging her name through the mud for fame. I took a deep breath, feeling the anger bubbling up again. This is ridiculous. I wrote my truth. I didn't distort anything. I simply told my side of the story. She had her chance to be honest and she blew it. Just be prepared for whatever comes next, my agent advised. The media can spin things quickly. I nodded, Although my stomach churned at the thought of facing the backlash, I had worked so hard to move on, to reclaim my life and my narrative. I wasn't going to let Claire derail my journey, so I decided to take control. I reached out to a few trusted friends and mentors in the writing community, sharing my concerns and seeking their advice. Together, we prepared a statement, outlining the truth of my story and emphasizing the importance of honesty in relationships. I wanted to ensure that anyone who read my book understood that it was not an attack on Claire, but rather an exploration of my healing process. As the media began to pick up on the story, I found myself thrust into the spotlight. I participated in interviews, sharing my experience and highlighting the importance of vulnerability and authenticity. I became a voice for others who had faced similar betrayals, and the support I received was overwhelming. Readers reached out, thanking me for sharing my truth, for giving them courage to confront their own pain. However, Claire's attempts to vilify me only seemed to backfire. The public response largely sided with me, seeing through her manipulations. She was painted as the woman who had strayed, while I was seen as a man who had found his strength in the aftermath of heartbreak. It was a strange juxtaposition, seeing my story become a source of strength for others while grappling with the emotions tied to Claire's betrayal. I felt a sense of closure slowly building as I shared my journey with the world, but there was still a part of me that wished we could have resolved this amicably. One evening, after a particularly emotional interview, I sat down to reflect on everything that had transpired. I realized that despite the pain, I had emerged stronger, more resilient than I had ever imagined. I had turned my heartbreak into art, and that art had found a voice in the world. But Claire's presence still lingered, and I knew I had to confront her one last time. I decided to reach out, inviting her to meet in a neutral space, away from the chaos of media and public opinion. I wanted to show her that I wasn't looking for revenge, I simply needed closure. When we met at the cafe where it all began, the atmosphere was tense. Claire arrived, her expression a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. She looked different, as though the weight of the past few weeks had taken a toll. "Jake," she said, her voice low as she sat across from me. "I didn't want it to come to this." "Neither did I replied, keeping my tone steady. "But you made your choices, Claire. You can't blame me for telling my story." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting nervously. "I know, I was hurt and scared. I thought being public about it would somehow take the blame off me." "Blame? You're still avoiding accountability," I said, feeling the anger simmering beneath the surface. "You had a chance to be honest and you chose deceit. You made this choice." "I know," she sighed, her voice cracking. "I've been seeing a therapist. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. I thought I was lost, but I see now how selfish I was." Her admission felt like a breakthrough, but it didn't erase the pain. "I appreciate that you're trying to take responsibility, but it doesn't change what happened between us." "Jake, I'm so sorry for the hurt I caused you," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't want to be the villain in your story. I never wanted to hurt you." "Then you should have thought about that before you cheated," I replied, my voice firm but not unkind. "I'm moving on. I've found my strength in this pain, and I won't let you drag me back into the past." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history hanging heavy. I could see the regret etched on her face, but I realized I didn't have to carry that burden anymore. I had done the work to heal, and now it was time to close that chapter for good. "I wish you the best, Claire," I said finally, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "I hope you find what you're looking for." As I stood to leave, I felt a sense of closure enveloping me. I had confronted my past, faced the betrayal head-on, and emerged stronger. I had taken control of my narrative, and in doing so, I had rewritten my future. Walking away from that cafe, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of Claire's betrayal no longer held power over me. I was ready to embrace the next chapter of my life, filled with new possibilities, opportunities, and the freedom to create my own path. As I stepped out into the bustling street, I took a deep breath and smiled. I was no longer just a man recovering from heartbreak. I was an author, a survivor, and a man redefining what it meant to live authentically. My story was just beginning, and I was ready to write it with all the love and strength I had found within myself.